Welcome to week 4 in CIT85 HTML and CSS. And this week we have some change in the way we're going to do our attendance because we're going to start working on project work, which is a way important part of this class. So I'll get to that in a minute. So we're going to talk about a couple course topics. We'll go over that and I'll show you what you need to do for your attendance post. So in some senses, we're doing what's called double dipping. So not only are you going to get points for doing the reply to attendance, but you're also going to get started on the project work that's going to be due in week 6. And you'll see me do this pretty much throughout the rest of the semester, to where I have a little mini like get started with your project work. But just to show you in our course, after I publish everything, at the very bottom you're going to see the projects as they're broken down. They may change in name, but then I'll release, once I finish the content for today, I'll release this one that we're going to start working on this week. But they will be listed at the end. But what that means is the way I have the course set up, they'll be available to you starting immediately after I publish 4, because they're not in the sequence, but they will be rolled out during due date wise. Okay, now speaking of kind of schedules and where we're heading, spring break is heading at us. Yahoo! So, one thing about spring break that I just give students a heads up, and I have the calendar, which, by the way, if you're not looking at course calendar, I definitely suggest, and for like you can select the course that you are in to see what the due dates are. So for our course, and for all the campus, right, here's spring break. So after this week that I'm recording right now, in the sequence is spring break. But before I head out to spring break, I will have 5 done as well. And what that means is if you had a chance and wanted to work there, you could. And the thing about spring break that is both good, awesome break, but also I've noticed with students sometimes once they get out of the routine of working, they have a hard time coming back. So this is true for me as well. So it's not that I'm going to take a break, but I actually am going to continue to work as I can based on my schedule for spring break on some content. So just to let you know that is heading at us, try to, and in a course like this, it's way important. You can see the work level and the importance of staying up to date. Which actually kind of leads me to my second topic, which is taking breaks. So taking breaks, and what I mean by this is with the code alongs. You've probably already seen this, where in the calendar, when I have a code along, and this has been true for HTML for the 2 weeks, and now starting in our next major topic, CSS, I do offer a break as long as you get to that point in the code along. So you have to get to that point. You have to submit your commit history. So, and what I do is look at the work and give you any feedback, which is way, to me, helpful. And the benefit of working ahead is that you get that review and then you'll need to complete by Thursday. And one of the things I realize is in the way that I've been talking about it, normally my second due date is a Thursday night, but I've moved the reviews to be somewhere on Friday, so that could be a little confusing. So just know these breaks are offered to you to complete and really by the time I wake up Friday morning. But here's the other thing is if you do them and complete them, you can also ask for a second review. Fairly common thing that I do in the course. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about that. And then one thing that came up last week, and when I say last week, because in the RL, in the real world, I'm actually recording this the 29th. You're rolling into week 3. I'm doing week 4, but I saw this in week 2 code along, and I just want to talk about it a little bit because it's good to understand it. And the idea of the way we reference relative to the current folder that you're in, both images, which at this point you've had some experience with, you're going to get some more in this one, but also related to the arefs, right? So the links. Now I don't actually do the whole code here, mostly because Canvas doesn't like it sometimes. But in this case, the way Dave shows it, right? So I'm actually going to go over, I'm running live server right now. I'm running it locally. One thing I can immediately tell, and this is what's good to help you start understanding this concept, is that when and this is not true for code space, although it will be somewhat true because you're working in a folder. And anytime you're working in a folder, Dave's example of the forward slash doesn't work. So as an example, if I go to week 2 and I scroll the bottom and I go to my about and I hit the back to home, what will happen here is this happens, and that's not the behavior we want. And why does that happen? Because from wherever you're running live server, that is considered the root, not considered, it is the root of your rendering, of your HTML rendering. It's like when you do forward slash, and you can kind of see it here, that is where it goes. And for our folder structure, that's not where we want it to go. And not only that, in web development, often that can be a little bit of a got you, because I've dealt with so many different servers and they set up their folder structures for the HTML and CSS differently many different times. But in general, we put HTML and CSS sometimes in a folder, especially for a larger project. And in that case, if you're doing forward slash, it's always going to break that. And now, I actually had a really interesting conversation. Now I'm back in the editor here. That forward slash that Dave talked about, right? The other way, and by the way, you can also see this. Like if you were to do forward slash stop right there, you can see based on my current setup, if I do forward slash, where it's going to go. Right? It's going to go to my CIT. And by the way, this is where you start to see your folders, because I've pulled in your code into my system. So one thing, and the reason Dave just does a forward slash, is that the server, the way the server works, it will just look in that folder and look for an index file. That way you don't have to specify an index file, okay? It just looks for it. But in our case with the folders, it doesn't work, and that's why, right? That will work. Now, why will that work is because when you do dot, so if you just do dot, forward slash, that's going to say from wherever this HTML is currently located, then look there. So you could just leave it like that, right? So dot forward slash would work. I just don't, for some reason, I don't know why I don't like it, but let's actually just go look at it run. So if I refresh the page, still on that about, and if I go back, then that works. And that's how you know it works, right? And sometimes, and I think where I may have gotten a little made it more confusing, is if you were opening your private repo in VS Code and running live server, then that behavior that Dave showed worked. But in general, right, because based on the folder structure we're using, it doesn't. So, either one of these is going to be fine, right? If you could just do index, that would be fine. Now, again, this depends on where you want it to go, right? Or you could use dot forward slash, which would indicate the current folder, and then you wouldn't have to specify the index. It would just look for it. And again, if it didn't find an index, it would look for the README file, which is what we see on GitHub pages. Okay, back to here. So just FYI, and what is important about this is to always test your code, and and understanding this folder structure. You may be testing it, it would be working, but it's like, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't quite. It seems to work, but you have to keep the folder structure in mind. Okay, so I'm going to actually have a separate video for this, but I just want to have you understand the idea of project work in this class. If I was to go over to Simple Syllabus, and I was to look at, and by the way, you should go over to Simple Syllabus periodically. Looks like it's still rendering for some reason this morning. Oh, there it comes. Takes a moment here. And if you scrolled through here and looked at the way the course is broke down as far as the work, 35%, it's a big percentage, comes from your development work. And I realized today I had put week 7, but we're actually going to start it in week 6. So your attendance posts are 5, your weekly work, which is really your your code alongs, right? That's what that is. And then the reviews are 10%, right? Okay, so just know that this project work we're doing has a pretty big impact, and there's not as many of them as the code-alongs have. So each one of them, you could figure out the percentage, has a pretty good size impact on your grade, but more importantly on your skill base. This is really where you take like what you're learning here, sorry, and you're seeing how well you can translate it into actually building a site. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the file. I actually haven't published it yet, but I have it on my local system. I'm going to bring up the file that we're going to actually look at in detail in a minute. Because, let me just drop a few things here so you don't have to look at everything I have open, right? So in this case, here is the that you will see. Now I'm running it on my local system. That's why you wouldn't necessarily see it in your normal, whatever your theme is, right? So I'm going to walk through this in more detail in a minute, but I just want you to know in the discussion or in the flow of things, this project is not due until week 6, okay? But for this attendance, you're going to complete step 1, 2, and 3. So when I go and look at them, right, so here's the setup, step 1, step 2, and then step 3. And in step 3, I have you create 3 additional pages, but I've said here, all right, you only have to create 1 additional one. So you're going to create your index file, right? And I'm going to give you all the requirements for doing that in the instruction. But for attendance, right, because I'm giving you points for attendance. So think about it this way. You're getting points for working on your project work in addition to working on your project work that will help your grade, both impact your grade. And then at the end of the discussion, because I'll actually go through and show you an example of what this work would look like. I don't actually give you the HTML, I don't give you, but I do go through in it and go over the requirements so that you understand what to do. But I wanted to point this out because, and by the way, if you could do more, I would, because this is going to help you when we get to that point in the course, right? If we roll forward, we will see it where project work is going to hit you, and notice how it's going to hit you on a Thursday night when we're still doing a code along. Now the good news is that after week 6, 7 starts to wind a little bit down, and so that's when project work really hits us, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different phases we're going to do to get to that. Okay, so I just wanted to go over that, and now I'll have a separate video for this. But remember, this is a short-term class. Keeping up is way important. Using late passes is always good, but honestly, I would wait until you need them for project work because they have a bigger impact on your grade, but you get to use them wherever you want. Understand that in simple syllabus. All right, cool. I'll pause this, or I'll drop this one and start with the one that goes over the actual project and what you need to do.